Almost every smartwatch these days can measure your heart rate using an optical sensor, and a few have claimed to also measure blood pressure, namely Samsung's newest Galaxy watches and a few others, but that's all been in the form of approximation. It's still using the same optical heart rate sensor to extrapolate. People that tend to have this heart rate usually have this type of blood pressure, and then it displays that for you as the metric. So it's never been really accurate. There's been a few smartwatches that have begun to take blood pressure monitoring more seriously, and they claim to offer medical grade accuracy. The first, I believe, is actually from Omron. The cuff is inflatable, so just like a regular blood pressure monitor that you would take at a doctor's clinic, it will expand to actually give you a real reading. So it's using this kind of double layered silicone strap design. It sells for north of $500, which just isn't very accessible. And then more recently, Huawei came out with their Watch D that also offers similar functionality using that inflatable cuff design, but it's not much cheaper. It's selling at $470. Well, today's model that we're looking at is yet another one of those competitors that has true blood pressure monitoring. It is the most affordable out of the trio which are available on the market. And they do specialize in smart health products. In fact, we've checked out one of their other products in the past called the Med Hub, in which you pop in your medication and it reminds you to take those meds using an alarm and connect it to your smartphone app. Even has a small OLED display that allows you to track your heart rate at the time of ingesting whatever medication as an extra feature. Pretty cool. So they have this health-based focus. Using something like this obviously takes up much less space than a regular full-sized blood pressure monitor. So as a fairly premium smartwatch, it still is built very well, looks quite elegant, has a 1.4-inch curved AMOLED display, has a stainless steel construction for the body, very premium, and connects to your smartphone to also track other metrics like sleep, number of steps, calories burned, the usual that we see from smartwatches. It also claims to have HRV or heart rate variability monitoring as well that can know if your heart rhythm is at a healthy overall level. You'll also find SpO2 or blood oxygen monitoring as well. However, it does not have built-in GPS, so it's not really meant as, I would say, an outdoor sports watch. It's really a health-focused watch. And on the inside, of course, we have just the smartwatch, as well as you'll find access to just a quick user guide to download the companion app, and it uses a charging dock with the Pogo contacts. Taking a closer look at the smartwatch itself, as aforementioned, it does feel quite premium, especially with the stainless steel unibody chunk. It definitely feels quite hefty compared to the majority of other smartwatches we've seen, which are made usually out of polycarbonate plastic. Although it's not too bad when it comes to the overall thickness, surprisingly, considering there are air pumps inside, but it definitely feels pretty substantial on the wrist, albeit not quite as chunky as I would have expected, especially if you are putting it against kind of sports or rugged smartwatches. The watch straps aren't as easy to release as a traditional smartwatch because they have to contain the air pumps, so the straps themselves would probably be pretty expensive to replace. So it's one area where you have to take a little more care. Obviously, don't puncture this. Otherwise, though, it feels pretty comfortable. The silicone material is breathable. If anything, though, because there are two layers, you have to kind of clean this a little bit more diligently at times because it can catch dust and lint a little bit more easily. The stainless steel, by the way, is super shiny and beautiful to look at, but one thing I will say is that it does seem to scratch a little bit easily, unfortunately, so it's kind of like the iPods back in the day. And then all the buttons here are located on the right-hand side, including a power key to wake and turn the display off, as well as a menu key for bringing up additional apps. All of these keys are very tactile and responsive, easy to click on, and then there's nothing at all on the other side. On the front here, again, we do have 2.D curved glass, which is protecting the 1.4-inch AMOLED display, which is very bright and vibrant. Like most premium smartwatches, again, OLED screens give you this amazing depth, so the background here looks completely pitch dark compared to the colors. That really does pop. The UI interface is proprietary, but it is quite easy to navigate. We're able to swipe down to turn the screen brightness higher or lower. There isn't a auto ambient mode, but still is easy to adjust, and the minimum and the maximum modes have a lot of variability, so I was able to see this even outdoors in most conditions, and also indoors at night it was still comfortable. Other options we have here include turning on or off Bluetooth to conserve on battery, turning on a power saving mode, which will restrict certain features like the continuous heart rate measuring. You can also take a look at a night mode for do not disturb, in which you won't receive any notifications if you're paired with your phone via Bluetooth. And you can also jump into turning on or off alarms, as well as go into the full settings here to check out more profiles. And there is even a always on mode. So if you don't want to time the screen off at all, you can flip this on, but that will also eat up the battery a little faster. Now by itself, if you're using it just to, let's say, take your blood pressure once a day, and you don't have the always on display, I was able to use this watch for about 5 to 6 days before I needed to recharge it again. Like most smartwatches, we can long hold for a few seconds to change the watch dial, and there are further programmable options from the app which you can push over. The screen technically is a square that kind of gives it away under this particular mode, but if you choose one which doesn't have a border, it makes it look a little bit more immersive. Otherwise, again, a beautiful display for sure, but doesn't really stretch all the way across. Still looks very good though in terms of sharpness, and the colors do pop, like I said, because of the AMOLED nature that they're using here. Now here's one other option which I do like, that shows off a little bit more subtle colors as you're looking at it. Otherwise, if we swipe over, we can go into a carousel view of some quick options, including on the menu here to the left, we see our daily stats for number of steps, calories converted, as well as going to the right, we see our most recent blood pressure test, which you can take just by tapping there. It will tell you to ensure you have a tightened strap. It knows if you're wearing the watch or not, so if you aren't, it's not going to actually do the test. And it also tells you that your heart has to be at a level position with the smartwatch. So you have to be kind of sitting down and still, or kind of put this next to your heart at a level position for it to get the most accurate reading. It usually takes about 20 seconds to get a measurement, and don't try to move around too much as you're doing your test, as well as some other recommendations, like don't try to for example, take caffeine or certain things that may stimulate or make you excited, let's say 5 or 20 minutes before you're taking the test. Otherwise, we can swipe over again to take a look at your heart rate, once more here for the blood oxygen, and then that is it for the quick shortcuts. Now to jump into more options, again, we can just press on this bottom key there, and that will launch into options like there is a weather widget that will show you the conditions for the day, but unfortunately it doesn't seem like you're able to see, let's say, 7 days ahead, but that's just a software restriction. Overall works quite well. We can swipe over from the edge to go back by one page. We can also take a look at our sleep tracking records, which will just show you for the previous night how many hours you've slept, light versus deep sleep, and we'll also see that later on in this video review via the companion app. The accuracy of the sleep tracking is actually quite good in my testing so far. It does also track your heart rate continuously, even when you're sleeping, to give you a more precise and full measurement throughout 24 hours. Otherwise, there is the aforementioned HRV analysis that will show you kind of the curve here, but for more details on what this actually means, you have to turn over to your phone's app to learn about that. Otherwise, swiping up, we can take a look at alarms. You are able to set up alarm clocks directly on the watch itself to ring and, again, vibrate. There is no built-in speaker or microphone, but again, it uses haptics to give you that alert. And then more detailed stats on here, including calories. You can also just tap here to take a closer look. In this mode, you have a bit more details if you're interested in kind of swiping down, which was missing from the carousel view, including past measurement records, which are also saved on there. Overall, the UI feels fairly responsive. It's not going to be ultra fast, but doesn't seem to be too much of an issue when it comes to just navigating around. Things still feel fairly responsive. Now, in terms of workout, as you can see, they're very limited. You have just walking, indoor running, and then outdoor running, and that's it. It's really not meant for you to use, let's say, when you're swimming. So that is one thing to keep in mind. Again, due to the additional parts and the pumps that they have on here, makes sense. There's just a bit more of moving elements that you should try and protect it against from those more extreme weather conditions. Last but not least, you can long hold on the power key for a few seconds to turn the watch completely off or enter a super power saving mode. Under this functionality, basically everything will be disabled, including any of the other apps. All you have access to is a watch face. The app, which is called BP Doctor Plus, overall has a clean interface you can drag down to pair with your watch and when you have Bluetooth turned on, and you're able to see kind of your last blood pressure test. And tapping on inside, you can learn more details, like for the week, your average, is it normal, is it slightly high, or should you consult a professional if it's reached too high of a level, and it will also show you those records down below. Overall, when it comes to the accuracy of the measurements, I try to compare it also with a regular kind of cuff on your upper arm, and in my testing, surprisingly, they were really just off by 1 or 2 points, the systolic and diastolic measurements. So it was actually very accurate, especially if you're taking the average over, let's say, 2 or 3 measurements. You actually end up with a result that is pretty par on par. This is pretty much as good as it's going to get in a really small form factor on your wrist if you're looking for a blood pressure tool. Now, other functionality you can also tap on here to learn more details, like the blood oxygen level, and it also tells you your record, but it doesn't necessarily give you recommendations, so it's not quite as in-depth, I would say, as what Fitbit and some of the more established brands on the market will have when it comes to the app. So maybe that's one area they can further expand on in the future. In terms of your heart rate variability, now this is the HRV, which tells you a little more detail. Now, this is one kind of strange thing about the app is some of the charts and the UI is kind of a dark background. I do think they can maybe play around with this a little bit more because I do find it a little bit hard to read at times, but still everything is overall presented in a simple way. So this is your personal scatter diagram of how your heart is doing in terms of the variability during the past day, and it will tell you a reference of what a normal kind of a heart chart looks like. So a comet shape, which has a kind of narrow tip at the end, indicates folks with normal heart rate variability, which we can see here, versus if you have a rocket shape that is kind of diffused towards the end, that's really saying that you may have a lot of variance in your heart rate and heartbeats. And finally, sleep. Now here's what I talked about. I took a nap towards the early evening and then woke up and then fell asleep again later on, and it counted and was able to track all of those in between. But it tends to add it up into numbers of hours that you slept for the entire past day instead of breaking it into chunks by nighttime and daytime naps. So that can also be one area that they can maybe improve on. But again, the accuracy of the tracking is quite good. Now under the Profile tab, you can also take a look at if there's any software updates, as well as change your unit of measurement, and also the dial. So this is the selection that they give you as far as options are to download and push over to the watch. So there are a few which are a little bit more colorful, a mix of different holiday effects as well as digital and analog options. But it seems like you don't have the ability to use your own photo as the background, so that it still is maybe not the most extensive collection in the world. But with that being said, you do have a few that you can try between. All right, so that's more or less it as far as our hands-on review of the YHE BP Doctor smartwatch. Again, it's really all about giving you that very precise blood pressure monitoring capability combined with what I consider as a pretty classy, elegant design. It feels really heavy in the hands because of the solid chunk of metal that they're using, and the beautiful OLED display definitely makes it feel like a premium watch, which it is at the end of the day. However, like I said, it's not going to be for everyone, especially if you're looking for a sports-oriented smartwatch. I think there are probably other more typical options to consider that can also save you some money, but if you do want something with, again, medical-grade accuracy when it comes to blood pressure and these vitals, then this is definitely worth a closer look, especially as a model that is, like I said, very comparable feature-wise and performance-wise to the 2 other models on the market that currently have this functionality, but this one here is the cheapest one out of the trio. So you can check out more details if you're interested, but for now that's been our video. Thanks for watching here at OS Review.